So we're going to get started here, and we are uh, visited here today by Rod Gagen over at Dominion Energy. He is undertaking a huge project to kind of rebuild the outage program over there, and that's what we're going to talk about today, how he's doing that, steps he's taking, how he audited it, and what the future looks like for him. So I'm going to let Amit and Rod take it from here. And yeah, any questions again that you all have, drop in the Q&A below or in the chat. And yeah, let's get going to it.
All right, great. So I'll start a little bit about how we know Rod. We provide software for electric generators. A bunch of the software is around outage management. A lot of the other software is around compliance as well. So we do real time and after the fact outage management, sending data to all the ISOs, automating all of this. We've been working with Rod for a while on the renewables fleet, but what's happened in the last few years, I think, Rod, your fleet just mushroomed in terms of how many renewables you had, right, in the last few years. So I think what ended up happening is that you guys have over 40 sites now, Rod. Is that correct?
Yeah, we are just right around 40 sites that are solar. We do have two small wind turbines, pilot turbines, and then we are managing a hybrid resource as well as a standalone battery resource, all in the PJM market, all capacity resources.
Yeah,
So
and
good morning, and thank you.
Great, thank you, Rod. And I think really this slide points out the key why we undertook this effort, right? For the inverter-based resources, 40 sites amounted to invert over 1,000 inverters, right? And each inverter is kind of like a unit at a conventional plant. It's like a generator on its own in terms of data and outage management.
Yeah, I mean, when you compare, a traditional generation site, to a that may have 3 to 4 components. If it were a 3-by-1 combined cycle, you compare that to a 100 megawatt solar farm that may have up to 40 to 50 inverters at that solar farm, that require the same attention and reporting responsibility as far as availability to PJM. Then you quickly see the scale and size and the overwhelming amount of data, amount of alarms, all the interaction that your operators have to have with their EMS console, and all while staying compliant, all while being accurate with their reporting to PJM. It became aware very early as we began to scale our solar fleet that our operators are really drowning with too many manual repetitive tasks. We saw the need to automate. We needed to automate processes. We were seeing, our operators are seeing where inverters come offline for 5 minutes, then return. Our operators struggled to keep up with that. Inverters needed to be reported out versus what inverters were available. It just became very apparent early on that automation was going to be key to keeping our reporting to PJM very accurate.
Yeah, so I think one of the key things you pointed out, right, is, at the traditional sites, you kind of had one or multiple operators for one site. Now it's flipped where you're getting, one operator for multiple sites. And, these guys have to do all the logging, switching, other shift responsibilities and reporting, and real-time duties. On top of that, you have to, report all this outage data. You have limits, other things that need to be done in real time. And it's just, I think it just became overwhelming, correct?
It becomes a human performance issue. How do you prevent the human from being human? In your slide there, you see the gentleman, the operator at his desk, with many tasks being thrown at him. Where do I go? Well, with the automation, you now open your operator up with a huge time savings. their ability now to, perform other important, tasks that are required of them. You mentioned a few: switching, managing on-site logging. Could be a reliability directive coming from our MOC via PJM to curtail a site. Entering event NERC logs, managing, of course, their shift turnover throughout the day, managing SCADA issues that may pop up in their generation management system. They're being pulled in many different directions. Human performance was lacking. We were seeing where other areas of our business were being impacted by just the sheer amount of time and attention that was needed for our operators to put towards accurate reporting to PJM. So in turn, PJM can forecast accurately.
No, that's a great point. So really, to summarize, right, there are just too many assets, too much data to manage at once. Even with a few assets, I think the amount of data just is just a bit too much, so it got complicated very fast. And I think you keep saying this, how to do this without error, right? When you're relying on human reporting.
Compliance is huge in the PJM market. You never want to get that knock on the door from the IMM or PJM, saying that you're out of compliance with how you're reporting. So we certainly wanted to tighten up any mishaps that were occurring because of the sheer amount of data. And really, the only solution to that was to automate the ticketing process, and putting proper controls in place, to ensure that accuracy to PJM and the ISO.
Correct. And I think the compliance, reliability are critical, but you also, financial, and there's other things, right, that are also as critical that come out as benefits from this. So it's I feel like it's been great that you started for this one reason, but there are so many other benefits, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen increase in productivity from our operators, as I alluded to earlier. They're now able to perform other very important tasks, improve the quality of our reporting to PJM. Of course, we're seeing a cost savings, not only by not having to scale with more employees or operators to handle the workload, but we're also seeing where our loss of production time is less impacted by more efficient process and more effective, timely notifications out to our field technicians and teams out in the field who are actually handling the correction to get this equipment back online and in service. We certainly want to have our renewable resources available, in a timely manner, and minimize the loss of production time for those resources.
No, that's great. And I think when you started this, it was great. You kind of started with the outcomes, whatever your ideal outcomes, right? So one of the keys you said is you wanted automation that was safe and reliable, right? Because you want to make sure that you're not adding more risk, you're reducing risk while getting all those cost savings and other things going. And then you also wanted to, make sure that the folks can really just focus on their critical operations tasks, right? Which is compliance, reliability, and, your company, right? You want to make sure financially you're making money, that production is optimized as well. And really the key to all of that was just the time savings, figuring out, minimizing the tasks. And I think this is actually oversimplifying it a little bit. If we go to the solution, we'll talk a little bit more on this, but the keys that I think, helped is everything was automated, starting from the source, which is Pi. It'll be SCADA for, possibly other resources, but It can be Pi, SCADA, whatever centralized system you have, but everything starts with that, right? So the key was detecting, outages at that source. And we're really talking about the outage automation here, but we're going much deeper, Rod, right? We're looking at all real-time processes overall and saying, hey, if this gets detected, then start this workflow. If we find this condition, then alert the folks, right? So it's just more than real-time outage automation. I'll talk to that a little bit more. We're just focusing on this because I think this is one key area. But really, it's figuring out, automatically, how can you tell people what to do? A system that gives people tasks, it initiates workflows. Because if people have to keep looking at data and systems to figure out, hey, what step do I take next? It involves a ton of training, having to remember all these things. And like Rod said, humans are humans, and you can't keep going and looking at all of these systems, right? So we're doing what's called active work, where the system's telling you what to do, not reactive. And folks save so much time because they're not staring at screens. The system's just telling them, hey, X, Y, and Z happen, go do this, whether it's, reliability, compliance for production or economics or any of those types of things, right? Or standard operating procedure. The whole thing is that the system's telling you what to do.
Yeah, the workflow within your tool is hugely helpful, because then we have a consistent process that each operator is following, as it pertains to compliance, a binary status of a piece of equipment out in the field. In real time, we're detecting that instantaneous data, that status change, which triggers, potentially an event report, which also then triggers to the operator, document the time the alarm came in, document the time the ISO was notified, document the time your transmission group was notified. This is all important compliance information, that we're able to ensure that our operators are all following that same consistent process. But yeah, first off in this step of automation is, getting the data available to you all, which, was fairly simple solution. But then, using your status information, your binary status or quad state statuses out in the field to, whether that be an AC breaker, a DC switch, whether you look at, current going into the inverter or, number of inverters, online versus offline. Those are all, important steps for us to establish, what constitutes an event that needs to be reported to PJM, and then having your operators, like I said, following that consistent streamline process where you're getting the same outputs from your operations staff for each event that occurs, was very powerful for our team. And like you mentioned, it makes it easier, training an operator, because now in real time they have that information in front of them. They follow the steps of the workflow, and are able to, be successful and, quite honestly, have a better experience as an operator throughout their shifts and their working days. So it's been a very positive outcome in many instances, because of the automation and the time, really, the productive time that they have to focus on really other important tasks. Not that this is outage reporting is not important, because it certainly is. It's probably the pinnacle of what needs to be considered important. But it certainly has been very clean and just consistent with ISO, and then the forecasting that results with that accurate reporting ultimately gives the ISO what they're looking for, which is an assessment of availability of intermittent resources on the system, they're able to calculate the proper amount of reserves needed. So, not only do we benefit, our operators benefit, but also in the end, the ISO, PJM in this case, benefits greatly from this automated process.
Yeah, so to kind of walk through, today what happens is we're getting kind of real time or near real time, hundreds of thousands of, pieces of data, right? And, just the pi tags alone could be 10,000 pi tags because you guys have 1,000 inverters. So one of the first thing that happens is the system's detecting, is there an outage happening? Did it start? Did it stop? Did derating amount change? And a human can review that. Right now, they do review it, and then that outage gets automatically sent to the ISO. It can be PJM, it can be Crow if you have other systems, or whatever, ISO. In Rod's case, it is PJM, it's the EDART system. Also, every few minutes, limits are reviewed, calculated, looking at the forecast, and those are updated at PJM as well, because that's a critical task to make sure, the systems stay updated. So this is all happening in real time. At the same time, this is Rod's group, but what happens, a lot of this data can automatically go to GADS, and they've used the same process to automate their renewables GADS, right? Especially the solar. And then this data can then go to NERC, but you can see how everything feeds in. At the same time, the system can do automated logs, right? Because we know exactly what's happening. Before, operators had to do one thing here, do something here, do something there. Well, now the system's doing automated logs. And if something happens, we can alert, right? This can be operations. This can be for production to make sure you maximize revenue. It can be for many other purposes. And then we're also, this is kind of the next steps. We're working on automating the morning reports for the different groups that do it. And I think, Rod, the Renewables Operations Center, you guys are also looking at, creating, anytime you have different items that go on with the units, or anytime something gets detected automatically, we kick off a workflow and people say, hey, and the workflow tells you exactly what you need to do with a checklist. And everybody says, hey, I did this at this time. And if A happens, this can also be kind of a branching workflow as well.
Yeah, excuse me, the days of, pulling out the old procedure, dusting it off, kind of working off of that piece of paper that, some of us older folks we're accustomed to, those days are over now. We have, now within the operator's console, they have this workflow that does, promote very consistent work practices. You mentioned about, the morning reports, the power analytics tool has been extremely helpful for us in being able to create, dashboards where during our 0700 morning meeting with the technical teams out in the field that are managing the O&M for these renewable sites, they can see on this dashboards through the power analytics tool just a very quick glance and get a very quick rundown of that site's availability for that day. Showing them the available megawatt, the derated megawatt, whatever, inverters are out. They can all see that on a dashboard and get a very quick sense going into that operating day, where they need to focus their attention as far as O&M. As it relates to, the automated real-time outages, we did speak a little bit about, what constitutes an event. It could be a recloser opening that causes a full site outage. Could be, your AC, DC breaker, AC breaker and DC switches opening that trigger an individual inverter outage. Beyond that, PJM, put into their market last year for better control of the system, as they see the scalability of intermittent resources and the need for better control of the system. They put this, this renewable dispatchability market construct out where they are asking that operators update limits every 5 minutes. We were doing that early on through an Excel tool, which, some days worked well, other days with Excel, if people have used the tool, it can be, glitchy when you start adding code in many units and looking and pulling a lot of data. It once again became apparent that we need a better solution than just Excel and our operators hitting a button every 5 minutes to drive what PJM was looking for. So, not only are we doing the automated real-time reporting in EDART flowing into GADS, but then we are also, updating our limits every 5 minutes per, using our instantaneous net megawatt data, trying to best forecast out in, 5-10 minutes looking out, which is a challenge today. That's something hopefully we, work on in 2025 and maybe have some opportunity to utilize machine learning or AI to help us looking at past trends to better forecast, because ultimately, that's what PJM is driving to. How can we control the system better? But we're using the Power Analytics tool, Power Manager, through the Integ Power Suite tools that update those limits every 5 minutes for us automatically. And then also we're taking forecasted information based on our availability and assigning that to hours beyond the current operating hour throughout the rest of the operating day. So PJM, once again, can look out and see, what's the expectation from those Dominion Energy renewable resources for that operating day.
Got it. No, that's great, Rod. And one other thing I want to point out is a lot of this information that's gathered, this is a different group, this is a different group, right? Some of this day ahead can get this data as well. But a lot of this, what we're doing is we're also for other groups automating compliance, right? So for example, simple things for EOP 12, the initial data is going to come from GADS, and then it looks at NOAA and it looks at the temperature. All of that data is here. So they can do that. For PRC4, a lot of the data is going to come from what happened with the outages, right? Then they do what compliance needs to do. This is also capturing your voltage bands, AVRs, all those things. All of that is flowing into here so that compliance is automated. What I want to say is that, while we're talking about real time, the company as a whole really, it's just one entity, right? So our goal is that when something happens, the system connects all the different groups, because right now they're siloed, and then somebody, for PRC4, they go look at the GADS events. For, AVR, they have to go somewhere else and check. And then for compliance, they have to do this reporting, go somewhere else. We've integrated and linked all these processes. So you have one source of truth and everything's flowing. So all these different, parts of the org can work together nicely. So just want to point that out a little bit as well. And
yeah, no, I can speak to the efficiency that's allowed for our compliance group, where, we were previously at the end of a calendar month, providing our logs to our compliance department, indicating to them, which units did we report for VAR 002 compliance, whether it been your AVR status change, your PSS status change, voltage outside, back in band. Now they can receive that information via the automated logs on a real-time basis and not have to wait till month end for all that information to be disseminated to them and reviewed, and what they need to do and turn around for their reporting responsibilities. So yeah, everybody, once again, benefits from, having a connected system, having a system that promotes workflows, consistent processes, and that information, being shared not only within our energy supply group, but also, within our compliance group, and even, with our technical teams out in the field.
Yeah, no, that's great. And last but not least is that since we're capturing all this data, we can do fleet-wide outage performance and analytics. And remember, it's not just within one group or Rod's group, right? We could say, how did data flow from Pi all the way here for NERC purposes? How did it go all the way to compliance, right? So if there's problems, since everything is linked, we can change one or improve one thing and it solves everything downstream. And in the same vein now, if you have new units within, a couple of days, you put in all the Pi tags and everything and you're ready to test, then, a week or two later, you can go live so that you can literally onboard a unit within, a week or two in most cases. In some of these cases, it can be within a day. So it's a beautiful thing, right? You can add as many units as you want, and in days you've integrated them into the entire process just by figuring out, putting in the Pi tags and configuring that data.
Yeah, the scalability, new units coming on as we, continue to build new solar resources, not having to depend on our internal IT and being fully as a business group able to, modify and scale, has been very efficient and, nice to not be dependent on other groups, for this information or for a new unit to be loaded and treated as the others are in the market with the automation that we've discussed.
Right. Yeah. And IT's great. They've been amazing. It's just, there's just so much to do, right? So it's it's super helpful to have self-service tools such as this. So, all right. So a little bit about how we built this. We use this using our Power Analytics, and this is all under our Power Suite platform. If anybody's interested, we'll talk further. I don't want to go into showing the tool. This is more about the process, rather than showing our tools. So I'll just kind of leave it at that. You guys can go to our website, intechconsulting.com, to reach out to us, or you can reach out to Adam or any one of these folks if you have, through here or through LinkedIn if you have any questions. But what I want to point out is that the work we're doing now is allowing us to automate entire processes across entire sets of groups. So it's not just real time. It can be day ahead. It can be the bidding process. It can be gathering all the compliance data. It can be alerting. It's just anything you need to make sure your units keep making money, you're compliant, and you don't have to hire, new people every time you have all of this, because especially from the compliance end, the requirements are just nonstop. And we're doing this for very big companies such as, Dominion, and we're working with many smaller companies and cooperatives. So this is cost effective even for smaller companies. The really rub is just to make sure that we can get to the data. Once you get to the data, all of this is very possible. So really,
I just want to note at the end of that commercial break, I did put a link if you all want to see it and schedule a time with Amit to kind of deep dive into this stuff. I did put a link in the chat there, and forward to see some people.
And look, you don't have to buy anything. I've had a couple of companies that I've worked with where I've given them what our standard best practices are, and you can implement those internally, right? If you don't have them now. So it doesn't have to be about purchasing software. Some of this we learned from you guys. You guys can learn from us. So just please feel free if you have even any questions. There's no cost to any of it. We can help you out. I think it helps lift up the industry as a whole if we can do a lot of this automation. So really, I think the key benefits, and Rod, you can kind of correct me on any of these if I'm wrong, was that, lower cost, you can scale without hiring, a lot of extra operators. Obviously, we know costs are tight with a lot of companies, and, even if you can add operators, just all the training and everything, it just ends up becoming a lot of work, right? So number two, reduce risk. For certain things, the data volume is just too much. It just can't be handled manually. And I tell people, even with the solar GADs, it's really difficult if you have more than a couple units. It's almost impossible to do it properly. I've seen people do it, and then they come to us and it wasn't done properly. So just, be careful. I think with renewables, I don't think you have any choice but to do automation. The third thing was simplification. There's so much going on, right? With the ISO, what you have to do for the ISO, compliance, logging, this, that. The system tells the operator what to do next. So, which is a beautiful thing. When something happens, the system is determining X, Y, and Z happened. It's kicking off the workflow, right? So this not only makes it a beautiful, simple system to use, but if let's say an operator left, you have a new operator coming in. Well, they don't need to know 1,000 things. You tell them, hey, this is how to use the system. Obviously, you have them go through your, training for PJM and whatever internal, but it simplifies, and can reduce training and other requirements probably by 70% because the system is just so much simpler to use. Standardization, this allows you to implement standardized processes across the plants. And this way, again, you can change operators, you can do whatever. If you have a lot of units, we have folks that have multiple regions, and they'll change people from one region to another because these are all multi-ISO systems, right? So that's been great. Breaking down silos. Again, Rod's group does not operate, just in a silo or a vacuum. They have to speak to other groups, and also the ISOs are involved. So we communicate electronically as well as, through other means with all the key stakeholders. So it's not just the system for, the real-time operations group. And that kind of leads into other benefits, is that you can automate and simplify downstream processes and systems. So specifically here, the GADS processes and a lot of the compliance, OMP compliance, not SIP compliance. I want to be very careful. We can automate a lot of that. We will be automating SIP compliance, but I don't think it matters as much for Rod's group right now. So just these are all really key benefits. Rod,
yeah, I mean, one that you could throw in there too is, data quality. The system is able to, which is very important, right? To have those controls in place. You're depending on this data for automation. You want to make sure that your data quality is good. The Power Analytics tool allows you ways to detect when you have flatline data or data that's outside of reasonability limits. Now in real time that data quality is bad and can get those issues corrected very quickly. Where before you may have missed that and find out about a data quality issue, 2 weeks later down the road when that could have been corrected in real time. So extremely powerful tool, the Power Analytics and the capabilities it's allowed us to do to standardize and allow our operators really to focus on, like I said, keep repeating the other important tasks that they have as operators to maximize production and limit downtime of these resources.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Rod. I think we've had even other clients you have some of these things happening every once in a while because operators forget or certain conditions only happen certain times, but it puts you at risk for either compliance or for, losing money. For example, if you kept limits or something, and you're in testing, you forgot something and everything was flatline. Well, if nobody noticed for days, then you could possibly lose, right, money or whatever, because your limits need to be adjusted. So with many clients, what happens in these areas, once it happens, we put that in as part of the automation. So if it ever happens again, it's going to notify. People can't keep remembering something that's going to happen, every 3 or 4 months. It's just, there's too many other things to do. And even if they did, they're not going to remember because it happened every few months. So that's the beauty of this system, right? It has its own intelligence in some ways, and you can just put that intelligence in to say, hey, if these conditions occur, then send this, workflow, and you set it and forget it, basically, right? So it's
when you think of the sheer number of errors that are, a potential for an operator, it could be, their megawatt set point, could be their voltage set point, could be the status of their AVR. I mean, the power analytics tool has also allowed us the ability to send notifications to our operator. Hey, check your set point. It's below Pmax. Is the site being curtailed? Is it a known issue as to why, you're sending your site less than a Pmax set point? So you very, once again, bringing that human performance element into it, preventing the operator from being human and making, being in an error likely situation.
No, that's great. And I think one of the main roadblocks that you talked about, Rod, was that data quality makes or breaks your process effectiveness. And, part of the common challenges, if you're going to kind of look to solve this yourself, is really start with the data and the data quality, right? So there's two parts of this. One is that the system can account for a lot of this. So in our system, we account for comms failures, we alert for bad or missing data, we alert for like odd conditions where, hey, certain things shouldn't flatline. We can't exactly tell why, but we're going to alert you, right? So a lot of those the system can account for. But before the system, you also have to make sure that you're using proper tags and you test various situations as well. So for example, within the automation, we're using various AC/DC switches, we're using the inverter level output, we use the unit level output, we use the irradiance, we use many different things, and we test various scenarios to say, hey, in an outage, this happened. If a fault happened at night, for a lot of situations in solar, people often ignore the nighttime hours, but for NERC reasons, you can't really, if you had a fault at night and it goes through, you need to report it starting in whenever it happened, right? So just that's why it's critical.
Yeah, and there, once again, the efficiency of that fault being detected, reported in at night, your field technicians are going to hit the ground running that next morning, knowing that issue is apparent and needs to be corrected. But we spoke about the data quality, issue and roadblock, and the importance of controls being in place. But you also touched on another one, Amit, that comm failures. And very important as part of the automation process, identifying comm fails and having a process to determine if the inverter in comm fail is indeed offline and not producing, or is the inverter possibly in a comm fail, yet still producing. It could be managed very simply by running a simple calculation, comparing your site megawatt to the sum of the individual inverter megawatts, to determine, hey, I know my site megawatt is correct. If the sum of my inverter megawatts is greater than my site megawatt, then I can detect that that comm fail, that inverter, even though it's showing as it is producing, my site megawatt is telling me it's not. So it is very important with comm fails, having controls in place to detect the state of that inverter and its output when the inverter is in a comm fail. That, great point, because comm fails do require, some thought up front to have a clean process to detect what the status of that inverter is in a comm fail.
Yeah, and I think the beauty of this is that we're gathering so much data that it's not just the comm failures. I think we're going to start next looking at the OEM fault codes and figuring out what are the most common things and how those can be avoided, right? So even though we're using it for this purpose, I think this data now can, as part of that analytics, we could look at it holistically and say, how do we, improve production, right, Rod, which is leads straight to your bottom line and is going to improve, the revenue collected if we can minimize some of these these items that we could, and look at.
Yeah, and I'm sure Dominion Energy is just like many other utilities that have internal goals relating to production time and E4D. Certainly we're able to, with the workflows and consistent processes, detect when did the inverter go out via the alarm, when did our operator report that to SAP. When did the technician resolve the issue? What was the code associated with that? What was the reason for the fault? And being able to not only have your technicians prepared and showing up to site with the right tools to correct the issue, but now you also have a trail and a tracking metrics to detect and do give you information back as to response times, typical outage times for, inverter having this particular fault. And as we do grow and, share this information more and more with our field teams, that helps them out in the field with, supplying parts and, having a warehouse of inventory of parts to know common problems. And what parts potentially could be difficult to get in the supply chain, but are frequent occurrences of long duration outages. We see a lot of opportunity in the future for connecting our field operations teams to this data as well.
Great, great. Yeah, and also benchmarking, units against the fleet, et cetera, as well, since you've got a good amount, and hopefully, maybe work with other utilities to do more benchmarking, that we work with as well. All right, so I think we've got about 15 minutes left, so I'll kind of go through this a little bit quicker than we would have liked, Rod, unfortunately. And this has been great. Thank you so much, though, Rod. These are all critical. The other item you want to make sure is, okay, if automation fails, what if it fails or is inaccurate? And I think the key things are that, you put in checks and balances with human review initially, and, we did a lot of it for months, and you didn't necessarily trust the automated processes until, the human review was okay. And I think that's a great thing to do. And from go
Yeah,
ahead.
no, I definitely recommend that for other companies that are looking to automate the process. You want to ensure, right, that it's accurate, that you're producing a quality, product to PJM, giving them the information that they need to conduct the balancing of the system. So, you talked about the quasi-human review. Our operators early on in the process would receive essentially a pop-up in their console to say, do I want to accept, reject, or deny this outage ticket? So we do have that quasi-human peer check in place, prior to going fully automated. Once you see a consistent flow of accurate information through that verification process, I think it does give you that peace of mind to go fully automated. But, certainly a great point, Amit, that you probably want to put that peer check in place early on until you have flushed out all the details and are completely comfortable with your accurate reporting to the ISO.
Yes, great. And second, this is more from the software vendor point of view, is we have an independent module that checks the automation module, because if the automation module itself fails, we don't want, clients to detect it, and they're not going to be happy. So we want to detect it as much as possible, and we want to put in the details to say, hey, where in the process is it failing? Is the entire thing? Is it specific processes? And people don't have to come look at this. We're going to alert them, right? So they can come look at it if they see it. But our entire model is what we call active, in that the system tells you what to do. You don't have to come look at the data all the time. So
and I think that's, with our partnership, that's, what gave us the peace of mind, to go to this automated approach with our renewables, is, we knew that Integ had as much care and just valued compliance as much as we did. And, that's very important. And, putting those detection dashboards in place, put us certainly at peace to know that you were doing the right thing for us, and making sure that we are compliant with our reporting to PJM.
Yes, and as we do this, I think Adam pointed out, let us know if there's any Q&A as we're kind of, we have maybe 10 or so minutes left as we're walking through it. And I may end up skipping this last section probably, but let us know if there's any Q&A.
If you want to keep your Q&A anonymous too, you don't have to do it in the chat. You can do it in the little Q&A section below and we'll answer it. So make sure you get those in.
Right. So yeah, as we're kind of doing this, again, just some words of advice, step back and zoom out. Really look at your internal processes, see how they're connected within your group, but you're going to have to see how the other groups are connected as well. Because so often I see folks doing this, but then it ends up becoming just, again, another siloed system. And if you really think this through and you look at the entire process overall, it'll make so much sense and you'll get so much more out of it, especially downstream. And remember, what happens with compliance, if you can make life easier for the folks downstream, it's going to make life easier for your teams as well, because they're not going to come ask all these questions and do all of this. So just for me, just even though this seems minor, it's been really game changing to make sure it's not siloed. So just keep that in mind. Number 2, define clear goals and test. I know it sounds simple, but really it's asking the question, what will success look like? And we walked through that earlier. And how are you going to be able to measure it? And the beauty with what we're doing is that, everything's integrated, et cetera. So we can tell how long it takes to get from A to B, what's the number of errors from, when you get to the GADs, was anything missed between GADs and real time? So a lot of these things, if you can put up front and say, hey, I need this, I need that, just what is success looking like, right? It's going to make it that much easier to do. Rod, I don't know if you have any inputs on, either one of these for the audience.
Yeah, it comes back for us is, prioritizing human performance. It's really helped our remote operators effectively manage our renewable generation assets. And, it also contributes to a more reliable, efficient, and resilient power grid. PJM, although they haven't, thanked us for automation and cleaner processes and more accurate reporting, we do have a large fleet within their market. So, we certainly recognize the importance of that. And, the being able to scale with the sheer number of resources that we've brought online. We started 10 years ago with, 5 distribution connected sites, all in the 20 megawatt range. Now, some of these sites are 150, 100 megawatt solar farms with the, sheer number of individual generators. Like I started off with the discussion, 50 inverters at one of our sites is not uncommon, and they all require the same responsible reporting that a 2x1 or a 3x1 combined cycle does, even though they're much larger in scale. So, and I'm sure we'll start to see solar sites, bigger and bigger with more and more data. So to be on the cutting edge of and early on in the development of renewable resources within the PJM market has been very impactful to our organization.
No, it's been great, and kind of want to wrap up and summarize what we've been saying with kind of one of the quotes that you'd given us is that, you guys were able to enhance efficiency and productivity by automating repetitive and time-consuming tasks. But you also significantly reduce risk and you standardize processes fleet-wide. So the ROI speaks to itself. It's a beautiful quote, so I really like it. It kind of sums up what we did. And, you know, I think the other thing that I'm excited about is that it has so much benefits for downstream processes. And, you know, we've been able to help automate and improve a lot of those as well. So we're going to wrap up here. Please send us any questions. Unfortunately, we're kind of out of time. These are, you know, we have an upcoming webinar within a few minutes for EOP12 or cold weather. And then we have one with GADS where we're talking to NERC as well as Texas RE on what's going on for 2025. We'll be focusing on renewables mostly, but we'll also talk a little bit about conventional GADS as well.
There is one question I want to make sure you hit it before we go is Pi EMS data sometimes tends to be finicky. How do you handle tag anomalies, like cases when states toggle back and forth, since so much automation hinges on this input?
So we use, it's, you know, in the old days it was called breaker chatter. It's kind of the same thing. So we use an algorithm to say, okay, if states go back every second or every few seconds and it shouldn't, then we have some logic that actually goes back and looks at other tags. So it's a great question, and it's something we account for. And if we can't automatically fix it, then we alert to say this tag is bad. And we also alert if the tag itself, you know, we've had this working with Rod, some tags have changed, and sometimes you just don't know. So all of that is part of the alerting and the mechanism. So it's kind of a self-healing system that can take care of a lot of this. So yeah, if you have any questions, if you do want to automate, you know, just let us know. You can get back to Adam or any of us and talk further. Go ahead, Adam.
But yeah, before you go, I just want to let everybody know that we are launching a community late January. It's going to be a community specifically for power generation professionals, for operations, maintenance, performance, information systems. Go to powercommunity.io, get on the wait list. We'd love to see you all there. It's going to be a fantastic platform. Yeah, if you have any questions, I put my cell phone number for you all to text me, and we can get you set up on the wait list. And yeah, we hope to see a lot of you there at our upcoming webinars and on Power Community in the new year.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Intake, for the opportunity to discuss.
Yeah, great job, Rod. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Yep. Enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Take care.